Live from this is fucking live from the apocalypse. Take 3, Disney Plus style. I am the Mandalorian, and my co-host is my baby Yoda, K Diggy. We have a very special conversation today. This is a conversation as old as time. I wanted to honor it with one of my oldest hats. This hat is so old, it has an army joke written in the inside of it. Word reveal.
Oh, look at those pins, man.
Yup. This is one of those things, man. It's like when I was in a local music store and I was buying, there was all the bin full of pins, and I wanted to kind of make this a classic hat of classic music. And so you'll see Johnny Cash, you'll see Billie Holiday, Bootsy Collins, Wu-Tang Clan, Lil KG Freeze, and Beck.
Okay. It's a nice mix.
Yes. So this was about classic albums and not in the historical sense. We're not going to be fist fighting over Led Zeppelin LPs here. Big Twitter, there was a mean guy on Twitter who said,
There's one.
I mean, and Twitter's my favorite of the social media, so what does that say about me? Something bad. He said, if it's so good, if music is so good right now, why are y'all always talking about an album from 25 years ago? Why are you always writing remembering pieces? So, all right, mean guy, we're going to take 3 albums from 2019 and we're going to nominate them for the canon of modern music. First, I think we should get into why a canon makes more sense than just like a Hall of Fame for classic albums kind of thing.
Okay.
I sent you the modern Western canon like Wikipedia entry with some quotes from Harold Bloom. I hate Harold Bloom, but he's got some interesting stuff. He's got some interesting stuff. There's advantages and disadvantages to the canon, right? The advantage is that it moves, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It moves. It progresses. It gathers, right? So, and it's a criteria. One of the things I read to prepare for this was a very angry thing about the Baseball Hall of Fame. And the guy was basically saying that it's meaningless because there's all these guys, kind of crispy white guys named Hunter, who get into the Hall of Fame every year. And that Albert Bell has just as good numbers. He never even gets nominated. Why is that? Well, because the people who vote on it are the writers, the sports writers. Yeah. They hated Albert Bell. Everybody hated Albert Bell, except me. I loved Albert Bell. But yeah, that's the problem with that, with a Hall of Fame without any rules, like a system of that album's a classic without defining any criteria. It becomes just some shit your group talks about, right? Right. So first of all, the canon. So the canon is a collection of influence, right? And there's all these interesting criteria that Bloom had about why something is in the canon that I really agree with. Infinite knowledge can never wonder. All wonder is the effect of novelty upon ignorance. How does that strike you?
Now, I didn't understand this quote. This was the one quote that I didn't get. What is it? What is your interpretation of it?
Why I appreciate you, K Diggy. You do not fake the funk. You don't get it, you just say, look, I didn't get that one, and we address it. Uh, Infinite knowledge can never wonder. That's to me the key part of this, right? Is basically the reason we hunt for classic albums, classic literature, is because we seek what we don't have.
Okay.
Perfection is not there.
Mm-hmm.
So we seek it. So our seeking it is our ignorance of perfection seeking something to teach us it.
Okay.
I like all writers are to some extent inventors, describing people as they would like to see them in life. It's a really
Yeah.
good one. To me, the most important one here is like nine words. One breaks into the canon only by aesthetic strength. Huge thing. And he was a huge person about this. Like Bloom hated feminist critiques, Marxist critiques, all these different critiques because they weren't critiques about the art and about how well done the art was. They were about something else. Right? I mean, if you're like, this really does adhere well to Marx's values, but it's badly done, like, what about the being badly done?
Right. Let's. Okay. Okay.
And he's not even talking about badly done. He's talking about like the opposite, the aesthetic strength, right? Bloom doesn't want you to elevate something that's okay to a classic level because it adheres to your values.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
He's
makes
saying,
sense.
look, if this thing is stronger aesthetically, is undeniable aesthetically, let's do it. That's the one. You know, uh, I don't know that life is as simple as that. Like, there's some weird stuff that is needs to be taken into account.
Mm-hmm.
But we can certainly learn from well done art, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of, so the disadvantage of the canon is that, like, if you look up the stuff that he lists as a part of his canon, it's Dante, it's Shakespeare, it's old white guys, man. It's not, you know, uh, there's no James Baldwin in that mix. There's no
Mm-hmm.
Donald Goines in that mix. There's no Robert Beck in that mix. There's was it Walter? What's that guy? I want to find out. Great crime writer. Mosley, Walter Mosley. There's no Walter Mosley in that mix, right? Like, these are all the same background. This was a problem I had. I I like to read. I like to learn stuff. When I got out of school, I was so happy because I could read my own books. I could hunt and find books that I found really interesting that were outside of the classic literature context.
Right.
Were as good, right? Like, um, and that's the problem with that is there's a cultural blind spot there, right? That isn't acknowledged. So
Yeah.
the canon acknowledges it by just being a collection of what's there for people, what's important for people.
Right.
Uh, yeah. So it moves.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, in terms of we're nominating 3 albums each, but we should probably talk about the problems with the term classic album
Okay.
first?
Right.
Because we grappled with this when we first set this topic. The first thing was,
Yes.
what is a classic, right? What do you see as the problem with the term classic album? Or any problems, yeah.
I mean, so I started out by getting the definition of classic. So this is the definition provided for the word classic. Classic, an outstanding example of a particular style, something of lasting worth, or with a timeless quality of the first or highest quality. So a lot like so what that means to me is a classic is determined by time. So in order to be able to recognize a classic, there has to be some time that passes so that we can see the full impact that this work of art had. And when time passes, we're able to compare it to other examples in that particular style, so that we can compare and contrast, and thus giving us a better appreciation of the classic or this work of art. So I think like a lot of artists, particularly like they go out and they say the term they use is this is a classic as soon as they release an album, or when they're talking about the album creation process, they're saying I was just looking to make a classic. And it just seems like it's so overused that we've just become desensitized to the word.
Mm-hmm. It has been very overused, but it's interesting. It seems like it's one of those terms that's used so much because everyone doesn't know what they mean by it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to figure it out collectively. I see two major issues that need to be discussed, right? Before any of that stuff can happen. First, is time. Time is a problem, right? When people say like, "Oh, it's classic," they use the Beatles as an example, right? The Beatles are an incredible anomaly in the sense that their music remains important now after so long, right?
Right.
But time, it doesn't usually work like that for an artist, right? There are a lot of classic albums and classic artists that don't move the meter for anybody today.
Mm.
You will see this, like as you get older, you start to see this. Albums that were considered classic, but aren't anymore.
Mm.
So what does that mean? What does that mean? If you make a classic album, but it's only a classic album for 10 years, what does that mean?
Like, do you have an example? What is like one?
Countless. There's countless examples, right? Like Pearl Jam.
Okay.
Pearl Jam, like when I was young, were known to have 3 classics: 10, Vitology, and Versus. There were people, friends, wearing opposing shirts. Nirvana, Pearl Jam, right?
Right.
And you fast forward to like 15 years later, and the only people mentioning it are old people that remember it fondly. But like, it's not really important for this other generation, right? Think about all the interviews that Frances Bean has done, Kurt Cobain's daughter, where she said, "I don't listen to that shit. It's depressing.
Mm.
I don't listen to that shit." Like, and I never got the vibe that it was like, "Why are you guys asking me about this music? This is scarring. My dad committed suicide." I always got the vibe she was just like, "No, why would I listen to that? It's just not. It's not my thing. It's not what we're into, right? Like some of that music didn't survive.
That's good. Yeah. I mean,
Some oh, hello.
oh,
There we go.
sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me plug the phone in.
Oh, good. So yeah, the classic stuff leaves a lot of ghosts. Leaves a lot of ghosts, man. There was, and I know this because my dad had racks of CDs, like huge steel rack, thousands of CDs, right? He had them in alphabetical and numeric order. And I used to just pick weird shit, look weird shit up. And my mom would come downstairs and be like, "Why are you listening to the music from when I grew up? What is going on?" And I would be bumping it, and I fell in love with the weirdest shit. Like, there's a group, British invasion group, um, called Herman's Hermits.
Herman's Herbits. A name.
And they came over. They were just as British and just as adorable as the Beatles. They never wanted to talk about anything substantive. They were just all fun ditties, right? If
Hmm.
you've ever heard the song like "No milk today, my love is gone away," like that's them, right?
Okay.
Um, I'm not gonna do the rest of the song. Darn it. Um, but I love it. I love Herman's Hermits. I've written the music into short stories and shit. And and it was weird because when I met up when I'm with my wife, her mother is really into Herman's Hermits, and we
Herman's
started
Herbits.
vibing on Herman's Hermits. And so there's this like scattered selection of people who love and adore Herman's Hermits, right?
Hmm.
But it's not classic. And it was some of the biggest shit in the world for a while.
I mean, I think in that regard, like Herman's Hermits and Pearl Jam, I think a lot of, because this we're starting to examine like an aspect of it, of like the classic criteria.
Yep.
I think a lot of it is determined also by what critics and true critics and those who are known as what's the word I want to use? Not innovators, but those who are known as the big deal in the fields, in the field that we're considering. They're the ones who determine what the classics are for the culture.
But they don't hold on to it, right? Like, remember, never forget that Ebert and Siskel walked out of Ace Ventura,
Oh, I didn't
walked
know
out of
that.
it, and it was one of the most important movies of that generation. Uh, they don't really decide whether it sticks. They pretend they do, but they don't. The people do, you know, the
Now,
culture.
is Ace Ventura, is it a classic or is it just very
It's
popular?
definitely not a classic. It's very problematic on the back end. If
To say the least, yeah.
um, so, but like they don't. I don't know. They don't have. There's something about it that's different. Like, uh, you know, looking at people who are in the midst, in the middle. I think of Tommy James and the Shondells. Have you ever heard of Tommy James and the Shondells?
No.
Three songs that stick with people that you'll know, right? Moni Moni, Billy
Yeah.
Idol. Yeah,
Yep.
that was them. That was Tommy James and Shondells.
Oh,
Uh, Crimson and Clover, Crystal Blue Persuasion. These are songs that are, in the annals of time. Are they classic songs? That's tough. That's tough.
all right.
So that's the first thing. Time. What do you call someone who was classic and considered classic for 5 years, 7 years, and then fell out of that importance. To me, that's still very valuable. It leads to my next point, which is levels. Levels, right? Uh, Jizza dissed 50 Cent in a very strange turn. Uh, but one of my favorite philosophical disses of all time, right? Because he called it paper plates. And it starts with a spoken interlude where he says, I met this dude outside of a show. He walks up to me and he's got a W tattooed right on his face. Wu-Tang Clan symbol right on his face. And he was like, and we were like in Amsterdam, like, this is not Brooklyn. And he's like, that is my legacy. That's my people. And he was basically saying, you're paper plates. People eat off you and throw you away.
Oh, okay.
So that's where you get this awkward, the paper plate superstar. This was in the. I had an argument with someone from St. Louis about this, and I can understand his perspective now because this was his guy. But he was saying, how can you say Nelly will be like not important long after KRS-One is? And I said, because nobody cares what Nelly's saying. Nobody cares. The strip club will refuel with songs. Like, it will work. Trust me. There's always a new Travis Porter type band ready to fill the strip club with music. Like, it's cool. It'll be fine. This is fun music, but it ain't that. And it ain't formative.
So is that criteria for you? Does a classic need to have substance to you?
It's a good question. I like the traversing the substance thing. I like the aesthetic strength, basically, that like there's no world in which I can call Nelly's music having a aesthetic strength, really. It's.
I mean, Hot and Her, with the two R's, Hot and Her. I mean, that was the song. That was probably one of the biggest songs, if not the biggest song of the year that it came out on. I mean, that was a cultural. Your grandmother, my grandmother was singing Hot and Her.
No, it's true. There's something different about the place it has in society. If you were to ask me, do you consider Wu-Tang Clan a classic? I would shrug and say, it doesn't matter. It's stitched in me until I'm dead. Like, doesn't matter. Classic, not classic. It's with me forever.
Okay.
Say what you will, right? And I think the Hot in Her people would remember the song fondly, maybe still listen to it occasionally, but man, they're still listening to Return of the Mac. Like,
I mean, that's
cool.
That's
a classic. It's a great song, but nobody cares about that dude or that album. I don't want a big negative thing on Nelly. Honestly haven't heard that much Nelly. But
you've heard Country Grammar, like EI. Oh.
I mean, I haven't heard the full album. No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, man. There was a time where I was allergic to the radio. I didn't mess with it. But
So what differentiates a classic? Like,
So we have to talk about the levels of a classic, because my
okay,
hypothesis here is that the same way that the Hall of Fame has levels, right? Like Vince Carter goes in the Hall of Fame, but no one's putting him next to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Like, we understand these people are different levels.
okay,
That's kind of understood.
okay.
So like, um, we talked about Camp Lowe's Uptown Saturday Night. That's a classic, but it's not Reasonable Doubt. It's not Illmatic, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay, so there's levels to the, so we can't talk we can when we're speaking of the classic qualification of an album, we need to recognize a level system. We need to recognize a tier. Not all classics are created equally. Is
Not
that
all
what you're
classics are on the same tier. That's what I'm saying.
on
And
the same tier? Okay.
that is one of all I'm saying is that's something that gets people tripped up, right? Because they'll be saying, "How are you going to say that album's a classic when it's not that album?"
Hmm.
Right?
Okay.
You're like, "Well, it's not going to be that album." Right? Like you can't replicate that album and stop using stuff you like to fight against other stuff you like. Like just,
Right.
you know, it's weird. So
Okay.
that's
Okay.
so that was my thing there. Time and levels, right?
Okay.
And they're very related. But I think those are the main issues.
Okay, and I do appreciate that, because I do think you, like, if you my definition of classic and extend an outstanding example of a particular style and something of lasting worth or with a timeless quality. So a classic can be something like Nelly's Country Grammar is an outstanding example of like the St. Louis style. So
Sure.
in that sense, it would be considered a classic album. But at the same time, the timeless quality of it can be debated.
Right. I mean, it's a say like
Oh,
I would put Nelly because I don't want to pretend like I'm disrespecting dude. Like he threw it down. He established what he did. I put him on
absolutely.
there with on the same level with like 50,
Okay.
right? 50 Cent, G Unit, like that wave. That's comparable to me.
Okay.
But I don't know anybody in New York who would put G Unit on Wu's level. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
I don't know anybody that would.
Okay.
I think they understand that there's tiers to this, right?
Okay. No, that's a fair point. Very fair point.
Um, so that's yeah. And the thing I like about the canon is it solves the time problem, right? We back to your definition when you say a lasting uh, effect, right, or lasting impression.
Okay.
Uh, lasting can mean 40 years, it can mean 10 years, it can mean 3 years. Lasting just means lasting.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, that's that's where I'm at. But I think it's a good deal. Do you have any other key questions regarding the classic and what were you know positives, negatives on that term?
No, I mean, I think the definition that you came like the particularly with the time and the levels. I think that that's a good context to view discussion in.
Yeah, man. The so let's get to the candidates. Do you want to go with your? Do you want to give your candidates, or do you want to go back and forth? We'll just go back.
Uh, did you do any honorable mentions, or are we just going right to the third
I'll
one?
go right to it, bro. Let's do it.
Okay. Because I was like my top two, I was pretty sure about. My third one, I went between three. So I looked at Solange, When I Get Home.
Ooh, that's interesting.
And then I looked at African Boy, Giant.
African
Sorry.
Giant, yeah, Bird Boy.
African Boy from Dallas, African Giant. But what I ultimately, and I was like debating about this for the whole day, and I ultimately went with Ariana Grande, Thank You Next.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And I know Ariana Grande has a very loyal fan base.
Yeah.
Very loyal fan base, and that is something you can't talk about her without mentioning. They ride or die, and that's a world of pop people with ride or die fan bases, and hers stands right with them.
And I mean that has to mean something. You know what I mean? Like, and because what I was going back and forth about was, you know, the quality of it. Now, would I put it on the same? And I'm glad you use level. Would I put it on the same level as my other two candidates? No. But she argued of that year, of 2019, she arguably had two of the biggest songs of the year on the album. And I think the album is an outstanding example of a particular style. And I think that this album is the direction that pop will move in. Oh, yeah. So I think that this is, for me, I had to put this as my number three.
So your number three was the Ariana Grande. What is the title again?
Thank You Next.
Thank You Next. Okay. The what are the accomplishments on this album? Because we're talking about necessary parts of what this should have. I should probably talk about that. We're trying to come up with components for this.
Okay.
Right. So three. So we're talking about achievements, the album having achievements. The album can't be a classic if only you've heard it,
right,
which is a fair deal. Which was really a rule for me. I'm a sucker for like small time underground stuff. But if no one knows it, then how could it have affected the world in this way? Right. How, and really that's the bloom point. The aesthetic strength of it affects the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that the influence makes it, it's that it drives the influence that it creates.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, what were the album sales on that? That must have been pretty crazy.
I mean, I think it was. Sorry, let me get my trusty iPad out. I mean, it was one of the top selling albums in the world for 2019. Man,
and I guess I couldn't connect to the album just from the sense that.
So let's see.
She's very good at taking the heart of like a controversy and making it work for her.
Yeah.
She was nominated for Album of the Year and Best Pop Vocal Album.
Yep.
At the Grammys. Seven Rings was nominated for Record of the Year, Best Solo Performance.
Thank You Next has sold more than 1 million pure copies worldwide. It was the 8th best-selling album of 2019 globally and ranked 4th among female artists.
And 86 out of 100 on Metacritic, which is very hard to do with a pop album. Mm-hmm. So, yes, she's very good at taking the controversy and making it work for her. And the funny part is Pete Davidson said it the entire time when they broke up. He's like, I'm done. Like, she's gonna cook me. She's a genius. She's gonna take this and work it, right? And she did.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean,
uh,
I think she helped introduce elements of hip hop into pop. I mean, and further, further extending hip hop's dominance over the whole musical landscape. But I mean, I think, I mean, if you really want to put it clear, like, I think Ariana Grande, I think "Thank You Next" caused the death or decline of Katy Perry and Lady Gaga's career.
wow.
Uh,
You think she basically replaced those
yes,
The Katy Perry listeners went to her, which is fair. She's got an incredible voice. Uh, she is, yeah, again, that's interesting. More
Katy
modern
Perry
production.
and Gaga as well. Even
Yep,
though
yep.
Gaga did first, I mean, look at it, Gaga did great first week numbers, but her lead single had Ariana Grande on it.
Right.
So I mean, that means something to me, I guess you could say.
Makes sense. The knock on Grande from the stuff I've read
Okay.
is that there isn't much there. That the lyrics are pretty straightforward, uh,
Okay.
meat and potatoes. That there isn't much to unpack. Like, what was a friend of mine said? Like, I've never come out of an Ariana Grande song wondering anything. Like,
And
I know
what's wrong with
exactly.
that?
I know exactly what it is. I know exactly what she's saying. I think they said they're almost like social media posts made into songs.
I mean, I don't think, and we were talking about Gil Scott Heron,
Right.
uh, and I watched his documentary last Friday, and he had a
Incredible
quote
documentary.
like where he was talking about how people they get caught up in the complexity of a poem. You know what I mean? And just because something is complex does not mean it's necessarily good.
That's
So
awesome.
I have no problem if with something that's done straightforward and easily understood. That doesn't necessarily mean, because it's not complex, does not necessarily mean there's not like an aesthetic strength to it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I think like the song "Thank You Next" was probably one of my favorite. My particular, it came out 2018, but it came out late 2018, and that finished like my top 3 favorite songs of the year. And that, I mean, that's a very simple, straightforward song, but
But
it connected with me.
but to that point, I think the best you made a great refutation of it. I think the best refutation of it is just like Whitney Houston didn't exactly blow your mind away either, right? Like, that wasn't her
Lyrically,
job.
right.
So some people are just, great pop is great pop, and it has a place.
Mhm.
Um, and boy, this thing, Complex had it third best album. Billboard had it number one. Uh, GQ had it two.
And
People
I
had
mean,
it
for
one.
me, it hit that sweet
Rolling Stone.
spot between commercial success and critical acclaim by critics.
Yeah, she's balancing it, man. She does it. That's fair. I have not met the Grande album that gets me on board, that gets me pumped up.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I totally admit and understand that A, she's talented. Uh, B, she's charming, funny, like charismatic, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The videos check out. Uh, this is not someone who shouldn't have the accolades that she has, right? Um, I always think of pop music like, don't don't think about how you know someone who's more talented than this who should be there, right? Don't be like, man, Dawn Richards is better than her and she should have that spot. Like, think that someone's going to have that spot. Someone's going to have that pop spot. And this is better than a lot of options you could have had. Is it better than a lot of options? Is it worse than a lot of options? Like, and she's better than a lot of the options out there. Um, that's not going to go on the back of her CD anytime soon. Uh, that's not a pull quote. But since you went pop, I will go pop. I'm going to go Father of the Bride.
Mm.
And I'll read my case.
Followed by who?
Oh, Vampire Weekend.
Yep.
So the last Vampire Weekend album came out 6 years before Father of the Bride. That's an eternity in modern music. It went number 1 on the charts, just like the last two. This was the group's first project since multi-instrumentalist and producer Rostam Batmanglij departed. It was primarily produced by the Ariel Reichstad, who collaborated on the last album, and Ezra, who also wrote or co-wrote every song. So he wrote or co-wrote every song and produced and co-produced or co-produced every song. This was Ezra's project with a lot of pressure. Metacritic has it 82 out of 100, and that is because some writers actually called it Vampire Weekend's worst album because it was a totally new direction, inspired by going to a Casey Musgraves concert. It's supposed to be too cheesy and romantic and cutesy. Spin's Jordan Sargent argued that the album was likely the band's worst, yet still rewarding. He praised the band's development, writing, on one hand, everything sounds spectacular. On the other, the album does contain some of the worst ideas the band has ever put to tape. But it did win the Grammy for Best Alternative Album. 13 songs from the album reached the top 50 Hot Rock Songs chart. It was in the top 5 albums of the year for Vulture, The Observer, US Weekly, British GQ, Stereogum, Los Angeles Times, Slant, Vegan, Rolling Stone, all had it in their top 10. It achieved the concept album with high marks and incredible guest contributions while having lots of meaty singles for the average pop fan. And I'm like, this was built to disappoint and didn't. It affirmed Ezra's legacy as the real deal.
And what I'll say is, now Father of the Bride, it wasn't one of my favorite Vampire Weekend albums. But what I'll say is, I can't deny the craft of the album. You know what I mean? And I get that's probably even a better compliment. Like, I may not like it, but I can't deny the craft of it.
That seems to be the overall thing. And Ezra just has a skill set, right? And he's got my favorite song on Lemonade.
Mm-hmm.
He did Hold Up.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did Hold Up. I mean, that was his, and he just has that. He has that skill. He can wrap himself around like a fun, jaunty melody, but pack the lyrics with really weird stuff about society or whatever. And it's interesting. He can make different kinds of songs. He picked very good collaborators with Daniel Haim and the guy from the internet there. What was his name?
Steve Lacy.
Yes. And he grabbed McConan, who helped him write This Life. He's just a very smart dude You could see him on the Rick Rubin show on Showtime, showing up at Rick Rubin's place, and he was like the only not chill person. Everybody else was chill and like and hanging out and talking about art in a fancy way, and he was like, "I got this thing. I'm working on this thing. I got to get it and hash it out." And he was very into the details, very detail oriented. Um, so the albums are very thorough.
Yes.
Whenever I hear somebody say they don't like Vampire Weekend, they end up telling me a variation of it. It's not my thing. It's not my style,
Right.
which is fine. But it's classic. I mean, it's so. Let's see. I got the Bill Withers.
Ooh, great
Bill
shot.
Withers might not be your style, but he's classic.
Right.
So I think that's what we're dealing with. I think it's. I also with the timing. I have to say, it's an incredibly hard way to make a living. To be one of those guys that drops an album every few years, that is
Yeah.
so hard.
Yeah.
So hard. Do you know how much happens in music? Like every year, you take 3 years off. No one even remembers who you are.
Right.
He took 6.
Yeah, and he came back in an entirely new direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna live on, and I think it's gonna be a new chapter in the Vampire Weekend thing that basically this was able to continue unfettered. Like
That's a good
that's how
point.
talented this was.
That's a good point.
So yeah, who was your next?
So my next one. Okay, so I'm still debating. All right, so I think my number 2 is going to be Eve by Rhapsody.
I wanted to talk to you about this one. I wrestled with this as well. I
Yeah.
wrestled with this as well. And tell me about it. Tell me about it before I get into my
And the only reason it wasn't at number 1 because of my three candidates, this by far was the one where I was in awe of the technical and craft of the artist. Rhapsody to me is a top 10 rapper, male or female.
Yep.
And I'm not making the distinction, male or female. She can go bar for bar with anyone.
Incredible.
And the facts. So her technical ability was on display. And then another, and this kind of ties into another aspect of a classic to me. To me, a classic has to have a convincing vision or story.
Right. I think it has to be tied together. It has to, like, right.
A convincing point of view. So, like, if I am enjoying a book, the reason I'm enjoying the book, we'll say fictional book. The reason I'm enjoying a fictional book is because the narrator, the voice of the narrator, is so strong that I get caught up in that, and I get caught up in this world.
What is the Denzel sci-fi movie with the Hughes brothers? What is that one called?
Oh, where he's blind?
Yes.
Story, Book of Eli.
Book of Eli. Thank you. I remember hearing back when W. Camus Bell had the Denzel podcast. And they were talking about these upper tier Denzel movies. And they said what happens is it's just playing on one of these channels you have. And it comes on, and you're like, I'm just going to watch a few minutes of it. Oh, it's this scene. I'll just catch this scene. And he says, Book of Eli, I missed my flight, you know?
Yeah.
Um, it's it's so good that that scene you watch connects so well to the next scene, you can't leave for the next scene.
Mm.
And I found that with a lot of my classic albums of like, I'm just gonna listen to like the middle of this middle chunk of this, finish it all the way through. Like
Yeah.
you just you just couldn't get away from how coherent it was.
Yes. It was
And
a singular vision, a singular statement made.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and I mean, Eve is not. It's not like a 10-track album. It's over 50. I think it's over 15 tracks, right? Something
It's a
like that.
lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. And yet it's all tied together. Her voice, her voice is strong throughout and consistent. Her technical ability is on display. It has an overarching message that ties it all together. So I to me it's a classic. But sadly, what held it back from being number one was the critical acclaim. And I kind of want to tie this into why I have an issue with the Grammys. I think, to me, it's clear that this was one of the best rap albums of the year, if not the best rap album of the year. And I said that last year, but it did not get nominated for a Grammy. And to me, like a Grammy, and it kind of ties into, a Grammy doesn't validate a work of art, the validity of a work of art, but it's still important regarding a legacy because it's what is used.
I
Oh, sorry.
just think that there's a lot of classic movies that never got even nominated for an Oscar, and it reflects on the Oscars, right? Like North by Northwest is like studied in film schools. It's brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Never got nominated for an Oscar. That's part of the way they teach it, right? They teach it as a movie that was like too good for the Oscars. To me, that's kind of how you teach Eve, right? She gets nominated for Layla's Wisdom in what, 2017?
Something like, yeah, yeah.
And it's her first Grammy nomination, and she's super pumped. And she's full strength after that. I think she links up with Rock Nation. She's like super powered. She puts all her ducks in a row and just says, I'm going for this thing. And that is her going for the Grammy. Like, that
Yeah.
is her pitch perfect explanation of what she wants to do. It's the best production she's ever had,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not all Ninth Wonder. It's not. It's Crisis. It's these different people. Yeah, Eric G. Yeah, they're just different people here doing great stuff.
And I mean, for me, like you could tell, and you could tell that it was her best effort.
Oh yeah, she was gunning for that, and she was
Yeah.
mad when she didn't get that nomination. She was telling people about it. I mean, it was so. To me, that's the
Travesty.
story of that album. Is it's actually better than Layla's Wisdom. Like, there's no question.
Agree.
Um, but I I have to tell you, because it was weird. Eve was an album that sank through my 2019 rankings.
Okay.
It did not appreciate it, depreciated. I love Rhapsody. All of her albums have little aesthetic flaws. Like, this one is very long.
Yeah.
Very, very long. It is. I don't remember what the total time is here, but it's 16 tracks. The last song is 6 minutes. I mean, it's a lot to do.
Right. That's true.
Um, and there's way too much spoken word.
Okay.
Way too much spoken word, man. And The spoken word is kind of one piece doesn't feel too different from the other piece. You know, there's some people have said when you're making a concept album, you don't want to make it like a hard uh, concept album. You don't want to stick too much to your concept.
Right.
You want to leave some room to breathe and
Okay.
mess around, right?
Okay. Okay.
Um, and that's what makes that's what there was with the Hitchcock quote that like you can't build tension with just tension. The characters
Okay.
have to laugh. The characters have to laugh. They have to have fun, and
Right.
then it tightens up. So it was Nina, Cleo, Whoopi. It was the more spoken word. It was a
I
lot.
mean,
It was a lot.
you can. She probably got that from Beyonce. Beyonce is known for. You're right. I can see where you're saying. I can see how it could be. The spoken word can almost be used as a crutch for pretentiousness, in a way. Like if you hear spoken word on an album, it's like, oh, okay, this is a serious. Like I need to take this seriously. Is that kind of how it
Well,
felt for you?
the spoken word explains over and over again a theme she's already explained. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yes.
Her
Okay, that's a good
songs
point.
are about this, and then the spoken word is about this again.
Right. I see what yes. Okay. That's a fair point. I never thought of that. That's a fair criticism.
So it just but it starts to feel like work after a while.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all I would say. I mean, I like I said, best um, production of her career, and she elevates to that production, right?
Yeah.
She crushes like Whoopi and the Oprah. Love Oprah. Love Lakaylee 47. Uh, the IBTIHAJ with Jizz and D'Angelo. I mean, it's all good stuff, man. Like
Yeah.
the song with Iman, the song with Sir and JID. There's a lot of good stuff. If you had either taken out a few of the spoken word pieces, taken out a few of the songs that were less necessary, I think this would be in there. But that's what prevented it from me, from my list.
Right. But even and that, what I think is even, and I think it's a distinction to make. Even a piece of work that is flawed can still be a classic. A classic does not need to be perfect.
Yes. I think the guidance would be a classic makes you love its flaws.
Yes.
That is why this got like a 90 out of 100 on Metacritic. This was like adored.
Yeah.
She is very cool. Like if you've ever seen documentaries with her, she's very funny. She's very cool. She's very humble. She's easy to root for, you know.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't mean that that there isn't stuff to fix. Let me see here. So that's second. Let me go. All right. I think you're going in order, so I'll go in order, right? Because my other question was going to be if you could only do one of these, which would you do? And if you're going in order, that pretty much answers that. So
Yeah.
let me do my second. Billy Wood's Hiding Places.
Mm.
So their studio, the Backwoods Studio, the label, has under 6,000 followers on Twitter. Billy Woods isn't even on social media. Billy Woods doesn't show his face in his videos. He is from the underground. His sound is jagged and it's so dense It's dense to me who loves dense. That is why it's amazing that NPR wrote on December 11th, 2019, the best rapper of 2019 is Billy Woods, the poet laureate of our Afro dystopia. That is why it is completely improbable that when Time declared its 10 best albums of 2019, Hiding Places was listed number 5,
Wow.
above Billie Eilish. Billie Eilish was 6. Stereo Gum, NPR, Vice all had it top 10 of the year. Underground rappers are constantly talking about Woods because he is an inventor. And each album is a departure. Each verse subverts the previous expectations. Woods said he was in a very dark space making Hiding Places. We will never get another album like it. It will stand as proof you can make your name on what you wanted your name made of. Hiding Places.
Wow, I didn't realize it was so quickly acclaimed. I didn't realize it was that Time recognized it. And
man, it is shot up like a cannon, and he became the guy, like behind the guy. You know, there's always there's always a secret best guy. There's always somebody everybody agrees is the guy, right?
right.
Let's call him Kendrick Lamar. Let's make up a funny name. And there's always like somebody being like, yeah, but what about, and there's always like that kind of chatter as to, and I knew it had become a big deal because Armand Hammer and Run the Jewels dropped like the same week. We talked about it.
Yep.
And critics were like, Armand Hammer's the truth. And there were some of them were just like, we don't need more of that. Like, we need this Armand Hammer. And it was just them. It was just, this is a thing. Underground rappers are constantly talking about Billy Woods is the best. And the more I hear him, the harder it is to argue with. It's a special thing where he makes you excited to hear his next verse.
Yeah.
Because it's so weird.
I mean, it's what we say, like, you know you're good when you provide something that no one else can get from anywhere else. People, and you can't get Billy Woods from, there's no other rappers or artists that are giving you what Billy Woods is giving you.
Yep.
I mean, so hiding places, I do, yeah. I mean, yeah, I completely agree with you. I agree.
And to prove, it's produced by Kenny Siegel, amazing producer. But look at the features on this album. There's only 3, 12 tracks, 3 features. One is Elucid from Armand Hammer.
Yep.
The other is Mother Mary, and the third is Self Jupiter. Self Jupiter is from a classic indie group called Freestyle Fellowship.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Freestyle Fellowship?
No.
So Billy Woods can't do it any other way. He's not going to do it any other way. He is this way. And was it, there was like, oh, I must have told you this story. Friend of mine, big Tom Waits fan. All the poets in the poetry scene were big Tom Waits fans. Like, huge. And this guy said to me, Tom Waits is Bruce Springsteen if he didn't sell out. And that was that like other guy thing, like that I tell you about. It was like, this is the guy that's better than the guy, you know? Uh,
Right.
and I feel like Billy Woods is kind of in that spot. Like, can you imagine what what pop rapper known for their lyricism would you want Billy Woods to feature on?
Pop rapper. I mean, it'd be very tough to keep with him. You know what
Can
I
you
mean? Who?
imagine? Can you imagine the damage Billy Woods would do to Nas right now?
Oh, you call Nas a pop rapper?
This Nas, yes, yes. This Nas, yes. He's a tech giant and he's a pop rapper. That's what this Nas.
Uh-oh.
This ain't Illmatic Nas, man. This is not. Come on, man.
Oh no, yeah, not. You're right. Pop rap Nas would not. No, no. I don't. Ooh, I don't even think that he'd be able to keep up.
It's to the point. Like, what was that thing? Did you ever see the movie Swingers?
Is that the poker movie? Swingers. What's it about?
Vince Vaughn. It's the early Vince Vaughn
Yes.
joint.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a point where he's turning to Favreau and he's saying, "You don't want to be the lead character in a PG-13 movie we're rooting for. You want to be like, you want to be the bad guy in an R-rated movie we're kind of scared of." Like, and that's so to me. If I saw a track listing for Nas's new album and I saw Billy Woods on it, I'd be like, "No, Nas, are you gonna be okay?" Like, I'd be worried
Yeah.
for him. That's
And
that's the space he occupied.
so give me a little bit of your opinion on talk about the aesthetic strength of Hiding Places to me.
Oh my god. Oh, it's there. Part of what is so great, and he admitted this. So he was on like the Dad Bod Rap Pod and said, out of out of the stuff that he released, like out of that and Terror Management, there's something really special about the production on Hiding Places. The Self Jupiter song "Speak Gently" is just really nasty. There's some really awesome nasty guitar. Um, it's fuzzed out. When it's minimal, it's not boring. It's scary.
Okay.
He has a sound, and that sound uh, is foreboding. It is yeah, it is difficult. Let me take a look here. The yeah, no, it's let me play a little song here because I've been telling you, I've been walking around saying it ain't the heat, it's the dust all week. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
It's not the heat, it's the dust. It's not the money, it's the rush. It's a bad man. There's when it's minimal, it's almost becomes like horror movie music.
Yes, that's it.
Do you
Yeah.
remember the Armand Hammers song I kept talking about, Slewfoot?
Yes.
It's like when it's minimal, it's that. It's scary, right? And it's all the aesthetic is keeping you on your toes. That's the aesthetic, right?
Right.
When you are listening to a Billy Woods song, you are in a haunted house.
And that kind of ties in back to what I was saying about Eve about the vision. Like his vision,
Mm-hmm.
uh the convincing, like his vision is very convincing. Uh you know what what he goes out, what he sets out to accomplish, he accomplishes.
Yeah.
He accomplishes his goal, particularly aesthetically.
And I kind of knew this last year. Like when I got the email back from Billy Woods with his interview answers,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely sat and thought about it and said, I'm never gonna stop being proud of this. Like this is gonna be important. This is a guy that's always gonna be important.
Mm.
Um, and that's hiding places at the center of it, dude.
Yeah,
To the
agree.
center of it. Uh, so you go next. I think you've got one of
Okay,
my favorite.
so my number one is Tyler the Creator, Igor.
Oh.
And I think it's a classic because for many reasons. One, it's one, I think it's his best effort, which for me that's a component of. So I broke down. I had a formula of the components that I view as necessary when evaluating like a piece of work. So, I think I had the technical craft of the music is good. My second one was the influence, and then the critical acclaim, and then the how convincing the vision was.
And if I could add one, I think there's one I would add to Igor because it's not my favorite or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a complete reclaiming of a second act. Right? Flower Boy was a second act. That was the start of a second act where he's like, look, I'm done with the like Eminem style gross out stuff. I'm going to really sink into this. Right? And he really did. And I thought Flower Boy was fantastic, but we didn't know if it was a one off, if it was a fluke, right? Igor let it be known. This is gonna be what it is.
Yeah.
This is the new direction. And I was like, wow, that's cool. That's very cool.
And to me, it was something that I kept coming back to. Something that I still go to. I think it has it has to be said. There was just nothing. It was difficult to categorize this album. There's just nothing like it that I heard in 2019.
That's a good point. Yeah, no, that's a great point. One of the rules we had is the album can't be a lesser version of something better.
Right.
Right? This fits your criteria.
Yes.
Billy Woods fits the criteria, right?
Right.
Inventive. This is something.
Very inventive. Yes, good.
His.
I'm write that down.
It is his. So I'm with that, and I salute that. So, do my number one. Is Kiwanuka.
Ooh.
Michael Kiwanuka and Danger Mouse. My case. The only reason it doesn't feel like Kiwanuka is changing music is because he's doing it internationally. This album peaked number 2 on Scottish UK charts, number 4 in Belgium, number 6 Dutch, number 8 Swiss, Italy, Norway, Portugal, top 20, 13, 11, 12. this album is even more personal than before. While still addressing racism, it is an album that teaches Black perspective. And I don't think people in the US are fully grasping how key the collaboration between Danger Mouse and Kiwanuka has been for giving the world that perspective.
What place was it here in America? How high did it chart?
Not incredibly well. Let me take.
Because I said I've traveled overseas, and the one thing I noticed is that, particularly when I went to Japan last year, the Japanese have better taste in American music than Americans do.
I believe that. I believe it.
And that's something that you've noticed around the world. Like other cultures, other countries appreciate American music and understand and recognize its validity. I shouldn't say validity. Understand and recognize good art more so than the actual Americans do.
You ready for this peak chart position according to Wiki? 142.
Wow.
31 in France,
Wow.
27 in Spain. Belgium number 4. We just don't care about it, man. And I think his last album won an award, a big British award.
Yeah. Wow.
It's
104. Wow. I mean, that says more about us than it does. It's like going back to the Grammy argument. That says more about American culture than it does how masterful this work is.
This album went silver in the UK, 200,000 units sold, 89 out of 100 Metacritic rating. By the way, Billy Wood's Hiding Places is not even on Metacritic. It's not even listed.
Wow.
I love it. I love it. The guy's so crazy. Anyway, New York Times, Good Morning America, BBC Radio, Guardian, Chicago Tribune, NME, Pop Matters, AllMusic, The Economist, all had this album high on their end of the year rankings. In a world of heavy auto-tune, Kiwanuka's voice stands out as more human than any other. And with each album, Danger Mouse increases the musical orchestration behind him. This album feels both perfectly formed and brilliantly out of step with R&B at this time.
Yeah.
Maybe my favorite first song of the year, You Ain't the Problem. And it just starts with the congas, and it's just, naked congas and just the kind of band groove, and you start to feel like you're listening to a 70s live album from Stevie Wonder or Curtis Mayfield. It just has that feeling. And he delivers on that.
Yeah.
He says some real shit on there, man. He says stuff like, never change my name no matter what they call me. Dope. But because he has the beautiful voice to it, soulful voice, you might not even catch all of it, man. He's spitting, dude.
It was literally a couple months ahead of its time. If that album was released in 2020 here in America, it would have been huge.
If it had come out when Fiona Apples came out.
Yeah, I mean, even I'm particularly with the racial equality. Not argument. The movement that's been going about for the past couple of months. If it had just came out
here.
Yeah. If it had just come out this year, it would have hit a little bit harder.
There's something about him that has missed American audiences. And I think he's super, super timeless. And I think Danger Mouse does his very best work with him. Very best. He's okay over here. He's okay over there. He delivers sometimes, right? He's the Tommy Lee Jones of producers. Uh, great, great, and then what? And then great, and then what? But always 5 stars with Kiwin when producing Kiwanuka. His and Kiwanuka's relationship has been fabulous. Brought the best out of both of them. Um, if I could only have one, I would have Kiwanuka because you know I tell you this all the time. I am like a soul person. Uh, I gave my friend was telling me that like people are giving themselves really weird nicknames on social media to make themselves feel better. It's pretty cool, right? It's pretty cool. Um, and mine would be Soul Clown, like that. I'm soul music is my natural deal, and Kiwanuka is always going to be in my back pocket. I can't step without it. Can't do it. Are you muted? Hello.
Can you hear me? Can
There
you
you
hear
go.
me?
Cool. Yeah, but Kiwanuka is always going to be with me. Always going to be in my back pocket, and it's the best of his albums, and I love all his albums.
All right.
They're all great, but this one is unbelievable. Um, so if you could have one, you'd have Igor.
Yes. Yeah.
Could Tyler save Kanye? Do you think? If Tyler locked in with Kanye, could he? Could he rehab? Too much? Too gone?
I I I I don't know, man. I don't know. I think for me, I think Tyler's too ambitious for Kanye right now. Kanye's speaking strictly musically. He's not musically ambitious anymore. He's not willing. He's not willing to give his very best effort. Uh, he's not willing to focus to give the best Kanye that he can give at that time. And I think Tyler has that ambition. Tyler has that energy, and I just don't see them working together, uh, being compatible anymore.
There's a big difference. You hit on it. There's a big difference between someone desperately trying to recapture what they had
Yeah,
and someone at the height of their powers and their
yeah,
confidence feeling like they could do whatever they want.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, Tyler right now, Tyler can go. He can go in any direction. I mean, he did Igor, but then you look at this year. He had features on. He had features on. What's my man's name? Uh, Bandana. It's
oh,
I'm
that's
drawing
Fred
the blank.
Gibbs? You talking about
Yeah,
Fred
he had
Gibbs?
on Freddie Gibbs' album. He had a
Oh,
feature.
Alfredo. Is it Alfredo?
Yes, on Alfredo. He had a feature on Alfredo. He had a feature on Pray for Paris. He did production on that. He can he can go and then I mean last year he had Igor, but he had a feature on You Say
That's right.
uh
Yeah,
by
something to rap about is it was the Freddie song, and you're right on the West Side Gun and the Freddie. He snapped on those.
yeah.
He did it.
He's just gold on the golden. Like he can go in any direction. The world's his oyster right now.
Fair.
And he's ambitious and he wants to make great music.
Yeah.
Uh
No, it's
so
so what was so if we take all 6 of our suggestions
Hmm.
and we take 3 from the mixture, what would that mixture be?
I mean, Billy Woods is definitely in it.
If you say Billy Woods in, I will take
Yeah.
your Igor as well.
Okay. So it comes down to the third one. I think the Kiwanak. I think that what I'll say about that is there's something about the soul. Like the soul never dies. You know what I mean? So even if like 20 years from now, 30 years from now, people don't understand coming from what he's saying
Mm.
or the context of what he's saying, that soul that he put into that album will translate and is timeless.
Yeah, I mean uh, yeah, it's definitely there, and I have no problem walking away from Father of the Bride, even though I love it, because there are definitely moments on it where you're like, oh, that's a Paul Simon kind of deal, you know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where there's like references that are pretty clear. Um, Whereas Igor when they look back, they'll say, "Oh, this was that shit."
You ever read Harry Potter?
No,
No. Okay. So this is gonna be really nerdy, but
do it.
one of the one of the concepts I really liked about it was there was this concept called a Horcrux. So what someone would do is they would take an object and they would put a piece of their soul into this object.
Mm.
It's a long long backstory, but what I'll tie to this is with these 3 albums, I feel like these artists put a piece of their soul into these albums. So when you hear this album, when I hear this album, like when I hear Igor in 10 years, I'm hearing a piece of who Tyler Creator was at this time.
Yeah, dude.
When I hear Kiwanaka in 20 years, I hear a piece of Michael's soul. You know what I mean? Or Billy Woods, I hear a piece of his soul. And I think the classic albums are reflective of the soul of the person who made them.
Total, 100%. And uh, there's a pure picture that gets painted, and that's why you feel it. You know, I put all my soul into this frigging guy. That's who I feel.
Yeah.
But recommendation corner here. Big day for the free music empire. Want to strongly recommend the Cabal A in parentheses by August Fanon and Iceberg Theory. Uh, and I just have to thank you again, man. Like when we talked about the Billy Woods interview and me always being proud that that happened, it wouldn't have happened without you having faith that it made sense for me to
Yeah, man.
push that line. And one of the things I thought about when I got his answers back was I haven't read a lot of interviews that go like this.
No, no.
um, and it's because just my brain works different and his brain works in a slightly similar way.
Yeah.
Um, and it sparks off of each other and you get these really incredible insights into the music industry, religion, capitalism, Jewish identity. It's fantastic.
Because it sounds like he wasn't trying to promote his album, and what he wanted to do is he wanted to have a conversation with you. It sounded like a conversation. You know what I mean? And that's why the stuff that you produced in that on that interview was excellent. You know what I mean? You get those answers when you come at it from a different angle.
He had to know. I mean, from having read because it was interesting. A couple people reached out to me after the Billy Woods interview and were like, "I want it." One of them was Blood Money Perez, who's on this album,
Mm-hmm.
and these guys all share this very similar mental tenacity. They want to give you a lot to think about in their verses about whatever they want to talk about. And I can be helpful in that because I really do care what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to hear you break it all down, you know?
Yeah.
So it was great to showcase how incredible his life has been, you
Mm-hmm.
know? The turns he's taken in his life to where he is. Um, very happy to have it as my second interview posted.
Yeah.
And
What give the website address again?
it's on Bandcamp.
No, I
And
mean for Free Music Empire.
oh,
What's the
freemusicempire.com, man. Just go
Free Music? Okay.
freemusicempire.com. But the Kabbalah, look for that on Bandcamp. Uh, and
Great cover.
and you cannot understate how incredible August Fanon is. August Fanon has produced some of Armand Hammer's best songs. He's produced for Mac Hami. When in the interview, he says, Iceberg Theory says, the album that he has with Vic Spencer is one of my favorites of the year. And I was like, August Fanon did an album with Vic Spencer? I keyed it up today. It's amazing. It's so good. August Fanon is incredible. He's on an incredible run. Chris Crack, he just worked with all kinds of interesting voices in music. Mac Hami, and he's the guy, man. He just keeps pumping him out. Keeps pumping him out.
Yeah.
Billy Woods has said that August Fanon will send you these like beat packs of like just a lot of beats, and you'll be listening to them, and they're not like it was okay, whatever. They're like all of them are so good, but you have to like shelf them because he's going to give you more, and they're going to be as good or better.
Right.
So you have to just keep stashing them until you find one you can't live without. Until you have to do it because
It's a good problem to
they're all
have.
so good, and he just keeps working so hard. So yeah, August Fanon is a name to know. But thank you, and when you are thinking about whether this is a classic album, start thinking about what level of classic it is, the time, how long you think it's going to last, why is it a classic? What has it done for music? Make the case.
Yeah.
Much more interesting than yelling at people. Stay safe. Keep your masks on. No coughing.